So if you're anything like me, you're a little bit picky about church music. If you go in there and it's sort of cringy or just not any good, maybe it could be distracting or take away from a little bit of your enjoyment. Not that church is about enjoyment per se, but that's happened to me. And maybe you've engaged in some of these liturgy wars in the Catholic sphere, or maybe between Catholics and Protestants or Catholic and Orthodox. Trying to find the solution to all this. I've done deep dives here and there on kind of solutions or ways, music could be better, or, what we could do. There are places where it's great, but, there can always be improvement for sure. And a lot of people say, oh, we should go back to only chant, or we should do, Anglican hymns, more, or, modern music, praise and worship stuff. So what I did, I just looked at what does the church say? So the church's document on the liturgy and on worship is called Sacrosanctum Concilium. It was a Vatican II document. And in the U.S., we then had a document from the USCCB, the American bishops. The document was called Sing to the Lord, and a lot of from Sing to the Lord was taken from Sacrosanctum Concilium. I put this little summary together, I guess, just looking at Sacrosanctum Concilium and then Sing to the Lord, which, as I said, a lot of it was taken from that for the American bishops. But, what they say is they want, above all, participation by the laity. They want people to be listening, be singing, be involved. And, people might not understand, but there's a liturgical movement for a long time before Vatican II, where people were trying to find ways that more people would be involved. A lot of the masses were what were called low masses. So it wasn't like there's this Templar Knights chant every time you go to mass. It was just this beautiful thing. Low mass means no singing, really. It's just a priest is up there and he's speaking in Latin, often quietly, mumbled, and not much singing going on. There wasn't a lot of participation. So that was kind of the scenario. This liturgical movement came up, and it ended up they succeeded at Vatican II and got a bunch of things to be adjusted, let's say. But for music, some of the things that the Sacrosanctum Concilium got together to get this greater participation was to make the human voice the main or even sole instrument during Mass. And then the quote is, of all the sounds of which human beings created in the image and likeness of God are capable, voice is the most privileged and fundamental musical instruments in the liturgy and are best understood as an extension and support to the primary liturgical instrument, which is the human voice. The musical instruments basically are there to support the human voice. You never want some really loud piano or guitar or drums drowning out people, and it can be very distracting. So what you want is human voice. Second thing that you can kind of pull, or this is my summary, other people could summarize it differently, is you should choose simple, easy to sing, and familiar songs. So, if you do some chant, maybe you can make it kind of so people could pick it up. Or if you do in traditional Anglican kind of hymns, do some that have pretty simple tunes. I find that I love Vatican II, but the songs that came out soon after often are not very singable. They're kind of confusing. People don't join in. They don't have great tunes. So the more traditional hymns I find are easier to sing. But whatever it is, there's some praise music that has simple, easy to sing songs that could be familiar. So that's another thing. And then incorporate traditions from both the church, Gregorian chant, that kind of thing, but also the culture that you're in. So you see this around the world after Vatican II, enculturation, where you get, in Africa, maybe things are done a certain way. And in Europe, in France, maybe there's certain elements of French music or Filipino, whatever, but they're pulling in different elements from the culture. So human voice, easy to sing and for people to join in, and connected to both the tradition of the church and to the local culture wherever it is. So keep those three things in mind. I really dwelled on that for a long time. I was trying to think, what is that? So I think Anglican hymns are a good way to fit that. But I was trying to think of other ways, like some of the liturgical music. like the mass parts and the psalms, I feel like do not really line up with that often. So just trying to think of that. I'm also a fan of bluegrass music and some of, country music, more Americana country music. So after, I've been dwelling on that a little bit, I one day came across the old Ralph Stanley song, "Oh Death." I like the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" soundtrack and some of the stuff on there. So I thought, that popped up and I listened to it and I thought, this is interesting. It almost sounds like chant to me.
Oh, death, oh, death, won't you spare me over till another year? Well, what is this that I can't see with ice cold hands taking hold of me? Well, I am deaf, no one can tell. I'll open the gate to heaven or hell.
So just to give you a little flavor, that sounds a little bit like a chant. It's very human voice focused. It's very kind of cultural, could pull you into the culture, pretty easy, could be very familiar to people within that culture. So I thought, interesting, you know? So I kind of kept that thought. I was like, is there other sort of Appalachian chant? So I say Appalachian. I live in North Carolina. I know some people in the northern parts of the Appalachian Mountains say Appalachian. So my apologies. But I kept looking into the different Appalachian chant, or sometimes called folk ballads. The words folk and ballad both have a different meaning now, but it was kind of a, traditional from the British Isles kind of music that came over to Appalachia. And there's a lot of it it's very, very interesting, has that kind of chanty element to it. So Tim Erickson is somebody that I found interesting. This song, he was a guy who was in punk bands, and he, I'm somebody who enjoyed punk when I was younger, and he actually toured with Nirvana with one band. But he made this album in one take after climbing up to the top of a monastery stone tower, and he liked the acoustics, and he just did an entire a cappella album. He's an a cappella singer. He was the advisor consultant on the movie Cold Mountain when they wanted to know, how do you make Appalachian music? But to get an idea of what other Appalachian kind of a cappella music sounds like, here's another one.
I love the Holy Son of God, who once this vale of sorrow trod, and bore my sins a heavy load on Calvary's gloomy mountain. High on the cross he shameful hung, the sport of man yet envious tongue, while pain severe his nature wrung, and streamed life's crimson fountain.
There's a little taste of that, and also, there are some that were sung. A lot of these are sung in church. So that song and the one I'm about to play are from a book called The Sacred Harp, and very popular songs that everybody knew, and they could sing a cappella in 4-part harmony. So the Sacred Harp book had a 4-part harmony. But here's one called "Am I Born to Die?" which this is sung in North Carolina, where I live, out in the mountains. There in Madison County, there's a big community of people that still do Sacred Harp singing and Appalachian ballad singing.
And am I born to die, to lay this body down, and must my trembling spirit fly into a world unknown? Alas, unpierced my human thought, what regions are dead, where all things are forgot. Soon as from earth I go, what will become of me?
Sorry to stop it. I know that's kind of awesome to listen to, at least for me. I really like that. Then, come in with 4-part harmonies, and they have, it's pretty intricate, but also very simple, and people can follow these harmonies. And maybe to get a better idea of what the 4-part harmonies sound like today, there are these meetups people do around the world. There's a lot in Ireland and British Isles, but also the Sacred Heart hymn book was put together in America. So there's probably most of the groups that do this, even though the tunes might come from the British Isles a lot of times, or they're made here. Some of them were made by, black slaves, and they introduced some of those songs in there as well. But some of these groups meet up and still do Sacred Harp, so you can see kind of what a 4-part harmony is. Here's what that would sound like. Just so you're aware too, they start off by doing the entire tune without words. So either fa sol la di do la di, and then they kind of will add the words after they run through it, so everybody's kind of used to what it sounds like. And you also see they do this kind of Kansas City Chiefs or Atlanta Braves chop kind of thing, just because people in different parts of the room, sometimes it can, gradually the rhythm can get away from each other, and you're on a different rhythm. So if you see somebody's hand going up and down, you can keep the rhythm.
First and second, repeat on second. And you can see there's really good, we're looking for participation. That's pretty good participation. People are almost yelling it often in these things. Because, I don't know, I heard there's a quote from somebody about this type of music, that they would cross the world to participate it, but they wouldn't cross the street to listen to it. I kind of like the way it sounds, but there's some people who are like, oh yeah, it's a lot of fun to like be in the middle of that and hit your part of the 4-part harmony, and everybody gets really into it, but it sounds kind of chaotic. Maybe. Like I said, I listened to punk music growing up, so I like a little chaos in my music, but it's organized chaos because you got everybody, hitting their parts and all of that. Another interesting thing is these shape notes that they use. It's called solfege. And it's a system that traces back to the original version of it. This is a little bit different, but the original version of these shape notes uh, is back to a monk in Italy, I think in the 1200s. So there's a good Catholic heritage there that the shape notes thing comes from a monk. And another cool Catholic connection, I think, is that they don't sing in normal scales. They use modes, and these modes were popular in the Middle Ages, and then they kind of went out of style in Europe, but they, in these, hinterlands of Great Britain, often like Scotland and Ireland and places, Ireland wasn't part of Great Britain necessarily, but, just in the British Isles, people kept using them. And so it was like the only place where these medieval modes that, Gregorian chant was also in, that those came over to Appalachia, and then they kept being used. It was almost like this little remnant of this type of scale. And interestingly, this is what I put up there is from an article I wrote about this, recently on the same topic. This is my little summary of it. And so Dorian mode and Mixolydian, not Nickelodeon, but Mixolydian, I believe is how you say it. They're the two most common, both in Gregorian chant and in this Appalachian, folk chant. And so it's pretty interesting to me because it sounds kind of almost liturgical, although, obviously it's used as church music, the chanting part, and also they have the modes, and they have even the manner that it's written, the solfege, the shape notes. So it has a lot of good kind of medieval Catholic connections to it, and sort of a remnant that somehow was planted in Appalachia and sort of a unique style. So I had the thought, you know what, this would be pretty cool to somehow incorporate into, Catholic church music. You could have, I'm here in the South, and in the US, it's a very American kind of sound to it, yet it also has these very ancient feels, and I think it kind of matches up with those three elements that were in Sing to the Lord and Sacrosanctum Concilium, those elements that the bishops want us to try to focus on, of, human voice and, traditional and easy to sing, but also culturally rooted. And so I remember specifically doing this, where I Googled or YouTubed, Appalachian chant, and those were the words I used. And I started seeing was a bunch of Eastern Orthodox videos were popping up, and it was like Orthodox Appalachian chant. And I was like, what? And so apparently, like most of my ideas that I think are great, somebody's already thought of it. So, and it was, there's not a huge Eastern Orthodox population in the U.S., but they noticed this sort of quality, liturgical quality, and the first people, it seems like, who realized that and made some cool music out of it were these two Eastern Orthodox seminarians. They took a break from their seminary studies and recorded this little Facebook video. And they thought, hey, let's see if we can put together something that uses that Appalachian folk ballad style. And also it's one of our traditional hymns.
Stand thou in nations, and submit yourselves, for God is with us. Hear ye, even unto the uttermost ends of the earth, for God is with.
So that was pretty cool. And then apparently from there, it just kind of snowballed. And now there's this whole, other people have done their song that they just did, but more professionally. And then, there's all these other songs. Like here's the one, For God is With Us, but done, with a little more production quality.
Understand the people that walk in darkness at the scene of great light. Oh, for God is with us. Be felt in the camp of the sad.
So there's that one, and then there's also other songs that are just as good, and as Christ has risen from the dead, trampling death from death is another traditional Eastern Orthodox song, an Easter song. And you can find videos of this being done across the U.S. in this style now, in the Appalachian style. And not only in the U.S., but here are some Slavic, I don't know, I think they might be in probably like Ukraine or somewhere like that. And, they're doing the same song in the Appalachian style, but in Eastern Europe, a traditional, area with a lot of Orthodox Christians. So I think it's pretty interesting. Here's how that sounds.
Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in death us bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in death us bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in death us bestowing life.
So that's Eastern Orthodox people having influenced, people in Appalachia with Eastern Orthodoxy, and then people in Appalachia then, influencing them back with some local cultural music. But it's pretty interesting. And you see they kind of kept layering up with the different, with the different parts. So there's like different harmonies, and they start with simple and then layer them on. But I think, I don't even think you have to do, 4-part harmonies like the Sacred Harp book does, which is more of a generally a Protestant book. But 4-part can be difficult to get all those people together and learning their part. So in an effort to keep it simple, maybe you could teach a choir to do that, I believe, but that's a common thing. But yeah, that's kind of my chain of thought. I just led you on my whole journey of thinking about church music, reading the bishop's documents, the Vatican documents, and then the U.S. Bishop's documents, and then seeing kind of what they thought would work best to inspire participation, and then the interesting sort of history of that a cappella Appalachian chant, coming from the British Isles, having a lot of influence from medieval Catholic church music, and the monks with their solfege writing system, and the Mixolydian and Dorian modes, I guess is what it's called, that those are sung in rather than our modern scales. And then how the Orthodox Christians, it seems like they have picked that up and run with it. And I think what they're coming up with is pretty cool. And I don't know exactly how Catholics could work this into the Mass, but I think you could we sing psalms. It would be nice if we could. What if there's some simple kind of Appalachian ballad style ways to chant the psalms, or maybe the Mass parts? I'm not gonna sing for you, but I've sort of been working on a way, maybe a Mass part, or doing the Kyrie eleison in this style. I can totally see it working, especially if you're trying to find something that roots American culture into the Mass, but feels sort of traditional and harkens back to
other eras and things like that. I think there's a great way to tap into that real Americana while having the real Catholic feel too. The Orthodox started there, but they don't own it because, as I said, we have a lot of connection to a lot of this tradition. Anyways, as a Western style, it's something that has those connections to monasteries and Gregorian chant. But it's very interesting that it's in Appalachia as sort of a traditional style of singing that was lost in the rest of Europe, and then somehow just kind of got planted there almost to be forgotten before people have kind of picked it up again. So yeah, just something for people to think about if you're somebody like me who really thinks about, okay, how can church music really live up to more reverence, more participation. It's something that really the bishops, when they created that idea of more participation through simple songs, a lot of a cappella, less loud instruments, and a little more cultural rootedness. This seems to me to fit that bill pretty well. But it's not necessarily easy to just put it all in there, or maybe it is actually. Orthodox seem to have just two guys in a lounge room just in between their seminary classes. Oh, let's see if we can do that. And then other people just take it and run with it. So I think that could be really cool if we could find ways to also do that. It's a very Vatican II thing, but also a very, if the Eastern Orthodox are doing it, it's not like it's some corny boomer, Spirit of Vatican II thing. It's really rooted in culture and tradition and everything. So there's a few thoughts on one potential avenue that could be exciting for future liturgical music in the Catholic Church.